Hi, everybody. Welcome back to the Alternatives Podcast. We are happy to have you, and you will be happy you're tuning in here today to listen to the topic of caring for your whole self with pies. And that isn't that we're going to teach you how to eat dessert throughout the day. We have a very special guest, Karen Pleviak, who has been the nurse manager, the STI coordinator, nurse extraordinaire, everything you could imagine here at Alternatives. And she's going to share a little bit about pies, and she'll break it down and give you what that acronym, what it stands for. But it's one of the ways that the nurses care for the patients here, and it's a great thing. And so we want to share that with you. So Karen, can you tell us a little bit about yourself?
I am a child of the King, first and foremost. I'm a mom. I have 2 children and 2 grandchildren.
And one husband.
Just one husband. One's enough. One wonderful husband. We're empty nesters now. And as Tammy said, I've been with Alternatives for 20 years. I think she said that. And most of that time I was the nurse manager, and now I'm the STI coordinator, and just enjoying seeing patients now as opposed to just doing administrative. So that has been a joy for the last couple of years.
And now you're a science teacher extraordinaire for your grandkids.
Yeah. So much. I'm having so much fun. My daughter's like, wow, Mom, kind of going all out. It's like, well, I have the time, and I like to make things fun and interesting. So yeah, I'm enjoying that too.
That's great. So you have been nurse manager, STI coordinator, so many different positions and roles. What does your job as the STI coordinator look like?
So I work with our nurse manager, Julie Adams, and our STI director, program director, Dr. Elaine Tang, in making sure the program is running smoothly, implementation. I order supplies. I work with the nurses to make sure they have understanding on how to do the actual walk through an appointment with someone, make sure that the tests are sent, that results come back, that appropriate nursing care is done, and then just training of the nurses for efficient and excellent healthcare. And of course, everything we do, we want to make sure is according to AAAHC and California state license for community clinics, according to those criteria also. So yeah, that's basically it.
Yeah, not a whole lot. Just a little bit.
When I saw this question, I'm like, well, I think I should probably look at my job description. So I looked at my job description and went, whoa. So that's where some of that came from. It's a good, actually, if you ever have a minute, it's just like, am I doing my job? It's good to kind of look through and find out what the expectations are and get clarification and kind of see where am I at in this whole, am I doing that? It can be kind of an encourager.
Yeah, that's good. So within your job as the nurse manager and the STI coordinator, our staff nurses, one of the big things that is so important is pies. And like Tammy said, it's not pumpkin pie, no. But pies, what does this stand for?
Well, PIES is an acronym, and it was lightly mentioned in some literature through the Love Approach from Heartbeat International with some training. And I'm always looking for acronyms to help people, especially the volunteer nurses, staff, follow a set course with patients that our doctor is aware of and okays, so that we are all doing the same thing. And so our level of care is at a certain height, at the very best. And so how would nurses remember exactly what to do? And sometimes patients come in and you get a little nervous. They're very emotional, and some of that can rub off on you. And it's just nice to be able to go back, okay, where am I? the patient took me off to emotional, and we'll talk about that's the E in PIES. They took me off to emotional. Obviously, I needed to focus there, but I don't want to forget the rest of my nursing assessment. So what haven't I done yet? What have I done? And then after doing it for a number of years, I realized as people came to me for counseling and even friends would talk to me, it was just a good way to make sure I was giving well-rounded advice or counseling to people, not professional counseling. We're not professional counselors here. Within our role as nurses, we give science-based education, evidence-based education to our patients. But I found that I could be talking to someone, going through menopause, and if I don't mention, they're just, oh, I can't sleep or whatever, and you might look that up on the internet and it would say, oh, you're depressed. When reality, no, you're perimenopausal. And so if you don't say to your friend, you know what, you're kind of at that age, have you checked, have you gone and had a physical, what's happening with you physiologically? Because sometimes we expect people to respond a certain way and they literally can't because there's something happening within them physiologically. And that can be the same for, them understanding as far as we'll talk about what it stands for, but the whole aspect of a nursing assessment. So while we kind of go through the systems of the body and we're looking for disease processes or something that might make us say, oh, this patient needs to immediately go and be seen because of this, this, and this. When you're working and assessing yourself or a friend, you can also do it in kind of a lesser way. And I'm going to share a little bit, I think, of both because that will help you all in your daily life, which hopefully that will be good. So you want me to tell you what PIES stands for?
Yeah, what does each one stand for?
Okay, so the P stands for physical or physiological. So the first thing that we want to look at is what's happening with our patient physically. So do we have someone coming in who has sores all over their body, or they can't sleep, or they're crying all the time? And of course, if you have a friend that's going through the same thing, that would apply. What's happening with them physically, and what do you see? If you meet someone, let's say you're talking to a homeless person, our major needs are food, water, and shelter. Well, before we can address pretty much anything else, we need to make sure that our main needs are met. And so we have that option of saying, let's get these met and then, get some health care, because if there's a psych problem, this person's not going to be able to follow all these other things that will help them move forward in their life if they can't think clearly. So, and we've had patients that, off the street that are living on the street where this is really important for us to do, to make sure that we're not just addressing the reason they come. We will always address the service that they've asked for. But sometimes people are in a situation in their life, and I think I'll keep referring to COVID-19 because this really applies. They've lost their job. Maybe both husband and wife have lost their job. Now they have kids at home all the time. They have, there's expectations for them to know and do things they've never done before. And this changes our whole lives, and people's lives are being changed physically because as a result of that. So physical and physiological. And for most people, I recommend don't try to figure out the physiological yourself if you're not a healthcare professional, but go and be by a doctor, because you could go online and honestly, you'll probably have, every
WebMD, isn't it? Right?
Yeah, no, don't go to WebMD.
No. So yeah, I recommend you'll think you have the worst, disease that you find. So that's not true. So the physical, intellectual, which is basically where is this person at intellectually? How do I communicate the best way, depending on if they're 12 or 70. And then and that goes with patients, and it also goes along with when we're counseling one another and just looking at ourselves. Sometimes we just need more education. We don't have enough knowledge about what's going on to make a decision or to move forward. So intellectual is really important. Some people come to the clinic and they don't read really well. So just even signing consents and understanding the care, we need to take a little bit of extra time and make sure that we really understand. And I think we don't always give ourselves grace to do that in our own lives. We feel like, oh, I should know that, or oh, why I didn't see that, why didn't I? And so give yourself some time to kind of understand. And I'll have to tell you, it can be so confusing, especially with all the information that's online. You know, you put in some information on the keto diet, and now you have 50 diets that come, or ways of eating that come across your Facebook. And it's just like, I don't want to hear anymore. And you read each one, and they have, you need to do this, you need to do this, and all of a sudden you have too much information, and you don't even know where to turn, what's actually truth and what isn't. So I think technology has played kind of a role in this other anxiety of, am I doing enough, or is there more information, have I not? It is another, I think, added thing that we need to look at. But it is
Information
important.
overload.
Yes, that's the term. Yeah, that's it. And then E is emotional. So what's going on with the patient emotionally? How are they feeling? What are they feeling? As you can imagine, we see patients who are pregnant in the first trimester, if you've ever been pregnant and in the first trimester. Even people who tend to be fairly stoic are a lot more emotional because you have all these hormones coursing through you. And not only that, but perhaps it's an unintended pregnancy, and now you have to make a decision, and you're emotional because of what's going on in your body. And so, you know, coming somewhere where you can talk to someone who understands that, who can explain to you what's going on, and people that would never necessarily think about making a choice other than parenting are considering it because they're just so overwhelmed emotionally. So it's really important, and we can be that way too. I am an emotion response person first. I have an emotion attached to everything, and I have to take that, and I have to take captive of that emotion. Is this a real emotion? Is this truth? And you know, because it can be coming from so many different things, how you grew up, you know, just a numerous amount of things. And then how do I take that information and look at it through a different perspective? And for a believer, that perspective would be the Word of God. What does God say about this? For our patients, sometimes they're not believers, but they have their own system of belief. And so I always would like to know, how do you make these decisions? What do you do when you feel overwhelmed? And find out more about where people are coming from. And of course, leading to the last one, which is spiritual. Sorry, I skipped one, the other S, which is not really S. So we say for nursing, it is an S. For nursing, it's psychosocial. But for you, and you're just thinking about talking to other people, is social, because social has played a huge role in this COVID-19. I mean, we are not getting our 7 hugs a day. And so that's for health. And so psychosocial is who is the support system for this person you're speaking to, for this patient that I'm talking to? Do they have a supportive father of the baby, or girlfriend, or if they're getting for STI testing, or do they not have a girlfriend? Does anyone know what they're going through right now? We have people who they're afraid to tell anybody. They're going through this all alone. We might be the first person that they've ever shared what they're going through with. And, you know, there are people in your church that once they know you're available, they will come to you. Like, I have not shared this with anybody. There's always, for me, there's that little, oh, am I ready for this? But, you know, maybe this tool will help you a little to kind of help them to see what they need to look at. And where they need to go. You know, sometimes you need to go to the pastor for education, for intellect, you know, the intellect. You need to go to the Word of God, and what does the Word say? And let's look together. So depending on your belief system, that's going to play a big role. And that's why in healthcare, besides psychosocial, the spiritual is important, because your spiritual, we're looking at people as a whole. And even, let's see, how old am I? So 40 some odd years ago, in nursing school, we were taught this. Basically, we were taught the system. So we would go through, you know, all the different, you know, the circulatory, digest, you know, and you'd assess each system. But I think for us using it in our daily life, this PIES works a little better. But the spiritual, we know from the Word of God that how we are thinking, how we are feeling. We're very clear how David felt in the Psalms, but his actions were not always, we're not always in line with that. And sometimes it's hard to make good decisions when we're, emotion. It's just like, I get rid of this emotion. This is a time of crisis, and that's what happens to people. I just want this emotion gone. And if the emotion's gone, then I can move forward the way I'm used to moving forward. And that's a really dangerous place to make a decision in. And so I think being able to help people, especially our patients, stop for a minute and look at what exactly is going on emotionally. And I think the majority of people say they're scared when they find out, because we ask them, that's actually a question on the intake of their medical history. How are you feeling right now? They're scared, nervous. Those are two things that are and that's across the board, whether or not they're considering having an abortion, placing for adoption, or continuing their pregnancy and parenting. It's a scary time. Your life is going to change forever. There's no, there's no turning back. So those are, that's how kind of why we came into PIES. So the nurse goes back and makes sure she has all of that. And then in our practice, we have electronic medical records, and the nurse's notes, it follows through so that we can then keep, actually answer questions to each of those areas and make sure that we've done a good assessment. And then for us, it tells us specific things that we need to do medically for a patient, which I don't need to go into, in detail. I already talked about one if we're seeing a homeless person, but someone might have a history of a disease process that we know will really affect if we get a positive pregnancy test. Or they might have a history of something that's happened to them, and it will affect whether or not we can do an ultrasound or how we're going to move forward. And so medically, that's really important for us, for them to know that information. And it's not something people will necessarily tell you. I kind of review those important questions because people, oh yeah, you know what, that I do, and sometimes people say, oh, I have a history of depression. And I'll say, so tell me about that. When was it diagnosed? Well, it was never diagnosed. So now I'm thinking, okay, this is different than, going and being diagnosed, and maybe, are you on any medication? Have you talked to anybody about this? And, just open-ended questions. So what's going on? And so being able to then, for us, there's actually a little depression test we can do, and we can refer them to a healthcare provider, if they, if that's needed. But to a friend, it might be, wow, you're really going through a lot emotionally. And, as a believer, we have the option of praying with that person. Even if we don't know the answer, we can be there for them and we can pray with them. And I think once in the 20 years I've been here, and I was in pro-life before, I've had someone say that they don't want prayer. Even if they don't believe anything that you do. I've had patients, Wiccan, whatever they are. It's like, sure, go ahead. We all want to cover our bases. So, you have that opportunity to share them. So again, we're focused on excellent healthcare, but the reality is we're a faith-based clinic. So that plays a role in, how much we care about the people that we see, and the fact that we do understand that they're not just their disease process. And really, pregnancy is not a disease.
Well, that's exactly why. That's exactly why we do what we do. Because I've always thought of this as the nurses are somewhat detectives here. As they sit down to talk to the patient and going through, you're looking at the person, and you said this earlier, people as a whole. It's not just this person with this pregnancy. This is this human being, this child of God. And there's a whole bunch of stuff that led up to her being here. And there's a whole bunch of stuff that she will continue with. So how can you help her as best you can in all these areas? Right?
One of the joys of working here is that I'm not relegated to 15 or 20 minutes. I have the option, depending on the needs of my patient and where they're at, to be able to spend time with them. Because you can understand how if you're maybe in a busy practice, the doctor, he might only talk to you about what's happening to you physically. And then if he suspects there's something going on emotionally, he'll give you the little test. Okay, I'm going to refer you to this guy, and then I'll refer you over here. But he's not handling, kind of helping you to look at the whole picture. And we have this usually 1 or 2 opportunities to see a patient, and that might be the only time before they make a decision concerning their sexual health and concerning pregnancy, of how they're going to move forward. So I think it's just imperative that we help them to look at the whole picture, and maybe even for those who are happy to be pregnant and are moving forward. The Lord always brings people to this clinic who have needs, and they're not always sure how to handle those needs. And so even our ability to help them to see these things, and that there are options for them in each of these areas, to look at more of a holistic way of handling their life, then we're able to do that.
And then
Well,
even
I
the
think you
case
take a
with
step back. Sorry, Hannah.
I was going to say that's even the case with our STI patients too. It's not like they're just in and out, wham, bam, just done quick. Like you walk through that with them, you take the time and look at their whole being, because yes, their sexual health is part of it. Yes. But as you've talked about, like, it's so important with all of these 5 elements of highs. So even for, maybe it's a man that doesn't even have a woman in no unplanned pregnancy or anything, but he's just coming in for an STI test. It's important for that too. It's not even just when we're in these hard, unplanned situations. It's important to evaluate all of this on the day-to-day.
It is.
Well, ultimately, everyone that's walking in the door here is coming because they do have a need of some sort. You just don't wake up and think, oh, I'm going to go to alternatives today. So you come in with a need, and I think it's a great opportunity for the nurses, how they strategically ask, and not close-ended questions, but open-ended questions to help bring out what other things they could help the person with, and not necessarily we're going to be the ones who are going to help you with this, this, and this, but be able to direct, okay, why don't you go here or go there for other resources or needs, like you say, homeless and things like that. But hearing this person out, you also said earlier, their beliefs and grace. And I think this is a ministry that's filled with grace. People come in here with different needs, their different desires, and we are a grace-filled ministry. I would say the last ray of hope, first sign of mercy. But and listening to them and their beliefs. How did you get here? What was the process that led you here? And so that I think you all have a whimsical way of talking to a person, not like but just really caring about the person. And that's quite frankly, you do that with your friends too. How I've listened to you, how you talk to people, and that's because there's a great care and concern for the whole person, not just this one little thing. And I think that's because that's what we should do as believers too, right?
So as we look at this a little bit more in depth at each individual one, you did a really good job explaining each one and why it's significant. But I would love to talk about how somebody more practically, I guess, can be intentional with this. So just kind of going through with the physical, how can somebody be intentional with that?
Well, I suppose the most obvious answer would be teaching people to care for themselves. The people that come in to our clinic, but the people that are listening, are you getting your yearly checkups or your annual checkups? Do you need to have an annual checkup? Are you getting enough sleep? Are you getting enough physical activity? Are you having good nutrition? So I'm not an expert, I'm not a life coach, but I think these are general areas where we would want to look to see sometimes just a couple of these that are not in sync. We're not sleeping enough. And because of that, we're tired. So we don't, we're not getting physical activity as we should. And then we make poor choices concerning nutrition because we're just too tired and so so then what causes that lack of sleep? Is it because you're up reading novels till 3 a.m, or is there something, again, you go back to physiological? You can pretty much start with any concern, and it might be an emotional concern, and at some point you need to look at the whole of pies, because we're integrated beings. We're body, mind, and spirit, and to have a whole and healthy life, those need to be integrated, and God intended for those to be integrated in our life. And so there are probably even more websites about what you need to do to stay healthy. I would say those 4 things are immediate things that we can look at and say, what, pretty much I live on junk food. Well, that's going to affect how your body is able to run, and we could go into detail about that, but it doesn't take much for us to know that that's true. And yet sometimes that's the easiest way for us to cope, is to pull out the chocolate, and if you're doing it 4 times a day, that's a little different than once a week. So how and I know myself as a believer, I always want to go to the Lord first. I tend to go to a thing, maybe food, or go to a friend, but I want my heart to want the Lord, and He wants that, and He wants that for myself, and He wants that, I believe, for the people that we see, that He wants them to know the height, the depth, the width, the breadth of His love for them, and having that kind of an intimate relationship that we all long for. And people reveal that in the rooms all the time. And of course, they make choices about how they're going to get that intimate relationship, whether it's concerning their sexual health or even moving forward when we see them in a pregnancy. So, but I think the last one I think is really important. I hope my husband listens to this. Stop smoking. He likes to have his cigar, but I think, and that means any kind of smoking, whether it's marijuana or anything you're inhaling into your lungs that's going to affect the ability over time for your lungs to work well. It's going to cause problems, and that's just simple CDC health or just the healthcare industry, and any healthcare professional will tell you that you need to stop smoking. So but yeah, having a healthy lifestyle, there's plenty of opportunities to have coaches. And if you have specific areas within your life, like, what can you do to sleep? There's so many, there's apps, you can listen to things, you can breathe certain way. There's quite a few things you can do that are natural. And that's the other thing you need to know about yourself. Do you tend towards the natural, or do you want a pill to solve your problem? So I think we become a society, in general, maybe that's not true. Maybe from the beginning of time, we've wanted one thing to do to fix everything. And so a pill is a perfect answer. If I can take a pill and I don't have to think about my pregnancy anymore, or I can take a pill and my STI is gone, then, life goes on. And maybe nothing has changed when the whole purpose of whatever it is you're going through, both of those things, is to move you on in your life, to grow. And in psychology, they would say you become actualized, become your whole self. That's not the way that I speak, but that's what we're kind of working towards. So that would be, I would say, the physical way of taking care of yourself. And then I think intellectual, I talked about this a little bit, is getting knowledge. Where do you go for your knowledge? Where can you go? Sometimes it's asking a healthcare professional, and that would be my preference, is to ask a healthcare professional for their input about the best information physiologically, maybe emotionally, a counselor, and spiritually, a pastor. And maybe you have just a good friend. I think pastors in general and counseling departments and these
Mhm.
various aspects of the church, while they're really helpful, and the diaconate, I mean, they help with physical needs all the time for people. While those are helpful, I think just being able to go to a friend who has some knowledge of pies and can kind of say, let's look at these things and let's, and you'll probably notice if you do talk to people, you tend to do this without
Do it
even having the
anyway.
pies.
Yeah.
You're just not really realizing it. But I know for myself, because I do respond emotionally to people. Sometimes, I'm crying with them. It's like, okay, Karen, go back. Don't just focus on the emotional. And, I want you to stop crying. So I'm going to say whatever I need to. But no, we want to look at them as a whole person. Sometimes tears are the best thing you can do. I'll just have someone sit across from you and cry. And then you don't say anything, and all of a sudden they'll just say, what am I thinking? Why did I even, this isn't me. Or they'll say, I absolutely, this is the choice I need to make. They become firmer right before your eyes. And you just having that opportunity to give someone time. They've been scurrying around because they're so nervous about what's going on. Do I have an STI? Am I pregnant? That they haven't had an opportunity to just kind of sit, take a deep breath, and think about what's going on. And sometimes they can't. Yesterday, my grandson wanted some foam board because he wanted to build these airplanes. And so I bought him some Dollar Tree $1 foam board. You would have thought it was the best gift ever. And he was literally jumping up and down. He was so excited to make these airplanes. And his pops, my husband, had found something on the internet that showed a form that they could cut out and then trace, so they could make a whole fleet of bad guys and good guys. So it kind of got out of control. But anyway, it was just the whole idea that he was so excited. And he said, Grammy, I don't know what's happening to me. What am I feeling? I said, well, you tell me. I said, are you excited? Yeah, but it's more than that. And so I've been helping him. He's like, I just can't sit still. I think I just need to do this, and I need to do it right now. I said, well, you'll have to talk to your pops about that, because I was helping my granddaughter, and my husband is like, no, we're going to follow, step by step. We have to cut out something. And he's just like, I want to cut, I want to do it. And I just thought, oh my goodness, that's such a lesson, that for me, he couldn't act outside of his emotions. He just like, I have to do something. I have these emotions. I need to do something. And I thought, I don't want to act like a 9-year-old, but I often move forward in that, so it's always good to identify our emotions so we can deal with them in a more logical way, or even an understanding way. Sometimes it's just to give ourselves grace. I'm feeling this. This is how I feel because I know what my history is. And so I can, as a believer, I give it to the Lord. Lord, I'm just going to hand you this now. It's way over my, but you got to get it out. So sometimes we need to cry, laugh, whatever it is. So that's important with one another, I think, especially in the church, because there's so many, as I said, pastors and so forth that are overwhelmed with the number of people and needs. And I think God intends us to help one another walk the walk. So I think intellectual, emotional, and then the psychosocial, again, there are lonely people in the church. And I think now with COVID-19, there are just generally lonely people because we're not allowed to, grandparents and grandchildren were being separated. We have parents who are in care facilities and they couldn't even see their families except on a screen. There's not the same connection. Perhaps we're learning to build connections a little better the more we do it, but it's not the same. I'm seeing Hannah, but I can't look quickly and see everything. I'm not getting the whole body. We train the nurses. If you ask a question to a patient and they, cross their arms and they cross their legs, it's like, okay, don't go there. They're telling you with their body what you need to do. Well, you don't even see that whole part of my body. And a lot of people are good about putting on a face, depending on what's going on. But there are clues if you're careful and you look as far as what's really happening with people. So I think we talk about a little bit about COVID, but COVID-19, there's this nebulous COVID-19 fatigue, they're calling it. And they've actually labeled it. And it's just this malaise that we have. We're not maybe technically depressed if we took the, the depression test for medical, the medical one, but there's this malaise that we have because of all the changes in our life. And we have to understand that those changes can cause initial anxiety, ongoing, and that affects us physiologically. So when we have these anxieties, our adrenals are affected, our cortisol levels are up, and so all of a sudden we see our body changing because our body's responding to what it's having to go through. And I was thinking, for generations, and this is a sad thing, but when the country went through war, men and women went through this in a very heated way. Their family left. Some of them died on the field. There wasn't food available. Women during World War II went to work and were making ammunitions. And so it changed who they were. And COVID-19 will do that to us. There hasn't been something, because the wars that we fought have been quite different with technology. That has really stressed us as a society. And you see what's happening. I'm not going to get into the political or any of that. It's not what I'm here for. But if you just think about it for a minute, look at what's happening in our world. A lot of it can be attributed to the fact that people are going through this fatigue and or this emotional reaction to what's happening because there's this unknown disease. And so I think it's really affected, and it's important for us to understand that in our own lives.
How it affects each person differently.
Yeah. And is it a factor? And maybe it can be a good factor. We've been focusing that joyful part of working here also is we get to have a time together in the morning and trying to focus on that. What can we see the positives? Can we look for something different in our life than just all the negatives? I can't be on Facebook all the time and see all of this. It would be to me like playing a video game where there's death and dying and destruction and people are after each other. If I did that hour after hour, I just can't imagine what it would do to me emotionally, because I'm watching people die. I'm a healthcare provider. I can't go into the video game and help them. And so this constant barrage to my heart and my emotions, that's just not healthy for me. I want to be updated, but I want to stay current with what's going on. And I especially need to do that healthcare wise and making sure infection control and so forth. But as far as some of the other stuff, I have to really be careful about how much I allow and how it affects me. And I think some people are just on it 24/7 and they're letting it come into their lives and be, emotionally affected, and then making decisions or treating people a certain way that wouldn't normally be what they would do, but they just don't realize how it's affecting them and how it affects the people around them, the psychosocial, the social aspects of friendship and of husband and wife even. So I don't want to hear about this. Can we not talk about this for the rest of the night? Can I, because we have different people with differing, interests and, so sometimes we need to make it clear what's good for us. And can we set aside a time where we'll talk about this and we can make it a snapshot so I can handle it better, because otherwise this is, I want to help people. And so for me not to be able to help people get along and be a peacemaker is very, it's really difficult. And I think a lot of people and people of all faiths are struggling with that.
Well, and so on this, looking at this with the pies, I think, in wrapping this up, one of the things that I think is clear, that how you were going through the intentionality as examples for people, but also as you working in our nursing rooms here, the idea is not to necessarily fix it for the person. There's no magic fixes in any of this pies. It's just allowing the person to look at each part of this, and we understand each one of us are wired differently, emotionally, intellectually, physically, however, whatever, even our spirituality. We as believers, we look through it through this lens. Somebody else might come in here and look through it through a totally different lens. That's going to play an effect on the outcome of whatever they're dealing with. Wrapping up here, what final thing would you leave with our listeners about pies? There's been so much good, and I thank you for all that. I think listeners are probably going, wow, yeah, I see this, I see that. And perhaps if anything you get from this is how to be a better listener with the people around you too, because our listeners, you're not all healthcare professionals, that I'm sure of, but you are mothers, fathers, boyfriends, girlfriends, sisters, brothers, and how you can look at the people around you and go, okay, what I'm, you could be Dr. Phil. What I'm hearing you say is,
Yes.
but, really taking a better stance at listening. But would you have any final thing that you'd want to say, Karen?
I think that you said it very succinctly. Being a good listener, that's such an important part of healthcare. We are in many ways investigators, and in order to get this information, you have to be willing to ask the questions that people can answer. And those open-ended questions, there are ways of learning to communicate by asking open-ended questions, by reflection, just saying, so this is what I heard you say to me. And then when someone hears that back, they say, oh, no, that's not what I meant, or, oh, wow, that sounds really selfish. And so tell me why you think that. Again, open-ended. So you learn techniques to keep people, keep them talking or keep them helping to get to a point where they feel confident that when they leave the clinic, they have a plan for their health. And your friend, when they leave you or when you're done talking, if it's, if it's whatever plan that you have to help them, whether they're a believer or not, you can still create some sort of plan that you can check back with them. And I always check in with people spiritual, because they are a spiritual being, and that tends to be the thing that people leave off.
Sure.
In my experience in life general, that's kind of the last thing. And maybe for young people, they're just so busy going about. And if you're the type of person, if you have a problem, you solve it. That's what you do. You just solve the problem. But how do you solve it? What do you look at? So I think this whole picture, and using pies as just a reference point, an acronym to help you look at the whole picture, so you can make good decisions and guide and lead people. And the Bible talks about, again, I refer to that because that's my life. That's what I know. But it talks about women being spiritual leaders and what we're to do and helping younger women. So how can we help them in a way that they might remember and grow? And I think what's good for, for us is good for everyone in our community. And so helping them look at themselves that way too. So there's no judgment. There's no matter what your belief system is, this is a good way of assessing what's going on. And it's a little different for the healthcare provider, but I think it can be used with individuals also.
And when you say plan, it's not necessarily a full plan in place. At least it's starting the wheels. It's a moving forward on not the focus necessarily on the problem or the issue, but how we could move forward in this, right? Because, as even in a friendship where someone is talking to you, nothing is, it will be solved over a cup of coffee if it's a big life issue or something,
Sure.
So it's just giving direction and naming. I think sometimes naming what the person's feeling. I think that helps with a situation, because they can't even claim it, what's going on, right?
Yeah, the perspective,
Right.
How are we viewing it? And if we can view it through someone else's eyes, sometimes that really helps us. It's helped me so many times. It's like, wow, I never thought of it like that. Thank you. I'm trying to understand another person and I just don't get them. And then I hear a perspective and I think, oh, okay,
Right.
that will help me to be more, to be kinder, the thing I want to do, but I just, truly emotionally, I don't have that feeling. And for me, that's always important. But what's truth? Truth is that this is what they could be going through. So, okay, I can respond differently now. And so I think that you're right. It's just really important.
Right. Okay. One last question here.
Uh-oh.
What's a recent challenge that you've overcome or are overcoming? Not that I want to fix it for you right here on the air. But
Darn. Well, I did get past this information ahead of time, that particular question, and I was thinking about it. Do I really want to share anything personal? But I think
This is
for
about
me,
being vulnerable.
I know, I'm trying here. I will tell you, I'm a little older now, and my role here has changed, and my life is slowing down, and my husband's all but retired, and I'm, getting less days a week working. And so it's kind of dealing with, and then with COVID changing, I just can't go out shopping all the time, or I can't, I can't afford to do that anyway. But how do I deal with this entering this new time in my life? I want to finish strong, and I want to be, happy. I want to be satisfied with what I'm doing for the Lord, and what I'm doing for my community and the people that support alternatives. Honestly, we wouldn't all be here and have the stories we have of what's being done here without them. So I'm trying to kind of deal with, and it's ongoing because I'm not fully retired. And how do you live with a husband who's home all the time, and is that wise? And so are we to be home? I don't look at retirement that way. Being able to be out of a workforce where you have to get paid versus being able to volunteer and always be active somehow in my church, in the community, and helping those that I know that are in need. If there's a need, it's just my, I want to help to supply the answer to that need, even if, or a resource that someone can look to. So it's kind of what does my life look like now as I get older? Not that I'm that old, but
Right.
yeah, the Lord is changing our life. And so in many ways, it's exciting. We talked about, being able to have more time with my grandchildren than I had when I worked full time. And so there'll be areas that'll be uncomfortable. But again, I use this, why am I feeling these feelings, and what are they based on? And is it truth? And how do I move forward? So I think that's what I'm going
That's a
through
good
the
one.
most.
Thank you.
Yeah,
Thank
the
you for
most.
sharing that.
Yeah. And then how can our listeners get in contact with you?
I would say the best way is through email to info@amc-ca.com, AMC being Alternative Medical Clinic .california.ca.com. That's where that comes from, if you're wondering why all the weird initials. So the info is a general mailbox, and that information will be directed to me, and then I can get back to you.
Very cool. And if you're more of like a phone call person, you can call at 760-741-9796.
And the extension back here where I am is, I believe,
just ask for the pies, lady.
well, we hope that all of our staff,
I know, I'm teasing.
So, but yeah, I would be happy to encourage anyone or speak to anyone, and just be aware that a lot of the education that we do with our patients is also on our website under pregnancy and patient education. So if anybody is pregnant and listening, and you're wanting some good evidence-based education, we have an ongoing, I'm not really trying to do an ad, but it's called Bright Course, and there's so much good education out there if you're pregnant or have been pregnant. If you're parenting and you want good help with parenting your kiddos, we just have a lot of good resources that we can literally text to your phone. And instead of wondering about what's going on when you're getting ready for work, you could be listening, or looking at some good education. So I'll offer that also.
That's great. We were literally talking about that right before we started in the morning, how it just helps us when we're listening to things that are encouraging and uplifting, how that totally changes our focus when we're getting ready in the morning versus why are my eyebrows crooked? Well, thank you, Karen. This has been so good. You are a wealth of knowledge and information and wisdom and all of this. And you were able just to put this so practically. And I hope that our listeners are able to apply this to their life and evaluate themselves, but also like learn how to be a better friend through doing this. So
We'll take it piece by piece though, because that's a lot, all that you said.
take pies piece by piece, take a piece
Oh
of
yeah.
pie.
Like the fruits of the spirit. If I
That
practice
was
gentleness, it might not be witnessed that day.
One piece at a time. You might need a couple, more than one
Right.
cup of coffee with someone to get to the bottom of whatever's going on.
Oh, that's awesome. And
Yeah,
thank you
thanks.
to our listeners for tuning in again today. I would just encourage you, if you are talking to a friend who's walking through something, really think back on what Karen shared, because there's so much in there that I think can be helpful as you're counseling a friend, crying with a friend. I love what she said about sometimes the best thing is just for someone to cry and you don't have to say anything. But yeah, if there's somebody that you can share this with, please do that. I know I learned a lot and I hope that you did too. And if you guys are online, we would love to connect with you. We are on Facebook at Alternatives Medical Clinic. And then Instagram, we are at Alternatives MC. And then Karen mentioned our website earlier, which is a great place to get information about pregnancy, sexual health. And that's amc-ca.com. Talk to y'all soon.